All right, so it's going to be a easy peasy kind of day. We're going to go over the study guide. We'll have not only the handout put up later, hopefully later today, knock on wood, along with this PowerPoint and recording. Oh, no worries. Anybody, it's all good anyhow. So just to kind of go over the format of the exam or quiz, I don't want to freak you out by saying exam or test because it counts for, I think, a total of 15% of your grade. So I've had students like barely get like C minus, failed, and then did really well on the final. And that's all that mattered. They were able to pass the class with B. So these quizzes, I'm not saying these quizzes aren't important. They are very important. But I don't want you guys also to be in a state of panic because I have done that before and I don't like to roll like that as a professor. So the way that this quiz is going to be set up is you're going to have 15 multiple choice answers. They're going to be worth 3 points each. You will have 15 matching questions, which is like you're kind of matching the term to the definition. 15 of those for 3 points each. And you'll have one short answer that's not your typical short answer question. It's going to be worth 10 points total. What you're going to do, and this somewhat is practice for your geography briefing in a way, is I just want you to list at least 5 facts or fun facts or interesting things, something that you had learned. Just throw that in there. As long as you get 5, you'll get the 10 points. If you give me more than 5, that'll be worth 1 point bonus. So, I'm not saying you just sit there and write down every single fact that you can think of, because good God, that's going to take too much time. But if you have a couple of things that you're swirling around, yeah, you can write that down. Especially if it's one of the silly fun facts that I've thrown into any presentation. I don't know if you've had a chance to check out the European Realm Part 2 PowerPoint. I will say, I do apologize that there is not the recorded video up. That was a whole saga that involved 2 days of recording and then realizing the file was way too fucking big. So anything that pops up on the quiz that's in the European realm, I've either already covered it in the first part, or I will have it included in this PowerPoint. So I don't know when I'll have the chance to get that other bit recorded. I will see what I can do, see if I can just take the file I have and like video edit it so I can break it in half. I'll figure out something, but you're not going to be at a disadvantage because of that. I wouldn't do that to y'all. That's not fair. But if you have seen some of the PowerPoint for the European Realm Part 2, I do include silly fun facts such as Finland is the home to the winningest goalie in Boston Bruins history, to Grass. And that the Czech Republic is home to NHL legends and Bruins legends Jaromír Jágr, David Pastrnak, and David Krejci. So if you have any memory of hockey or just want to say NHL players are from this country, fun facts, points. Woo! All right. So things to kind of know about these terms, and again, not all of them will apply, but in general, what realm or region is it in? So if I'm asking about hacienda, I'm talking about the South American realm. Any notable geographic features? So if I'm talking about, say, I don't know, the Great Lakes, that they are in North America. You won't have to name them in order, but that's what I mean by that. Natural resources. So if we're talking about, say, the Lesser Antilles, for natural resources, they've got shit. They have to import a lot of their stuff, but they get a shit ton of money with tourism. So that's kind of the idea there. By the way, that thing about the Lesser Antilles, big hints on that. So we'll say in that. Other things that you might want to know, neighboring countries. if you want to grab a study guide, that's right there. So like, if, again, talking about this country is in the EU, maybe this one isn't. Okay, that's a bad example for, because I talk more about that in the recorded lecture. But, you know, if, like, knowing that even though Mexico and America and the United States are neighbors, they're still in technically different realms, that kind of thing. Any kind of conflicts that are going on, past or present, and like maybe a general description. So that's the basics for the exam, for the quiz. And everything that is on this quiz, again, is somewhere on this PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will look familiar because I literally just went realm by realm and stole my old slides and just put it all together. But this way you know how to focus your study a wee bit more. So the North American realm, the first one we covered. I know I said in the beginning of this that I would cover the first chapter, but I'm only covering the first chapter in ways of, okay, here's terminology, like what's a realm, kind of. So physiographic regions of North America include, one of the unique properties of the North American mass is the absolute insane variation of regional landscapes. For instance, we've got the Pacific Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Great Plains and interior lowlands. We've got the Great Lakes. I like the acronym HOMES. That's how I learned how to remember what the lakes are. HOMES stands for Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. HOMES. This is what happens when you grow up right next to Lake Michigan and they feel like that's an important thing for you to learn in elementary school. There's also the Appalachian Mountains and the Canadian Shield. So stuff about the Appalachian Mountains, it does stretch from the North Atlantic coast to the southeastern United States. So like it goes into Canada all the way through to the foothills in Alabama. The southeastern parts of the Appalachians have developed their own culture. It's similar to Southern culture, but it's different enough to be their own. A lot of isolation will tend to happen because you're in a mountainous area that is kind of isolated. It is over 1,553 miles long. And there are people that will just hike this trail for funsies. I include my uncle in this. And yes, he is insane. Because that's a long hike. It takes months. And if you're into that, all the credit. I would walk 15 miles and then be like, nope, I'm good. I'm done. Going back home. So the Great Lakes. I still foolishly do not have them in the HOMES order, but it's at least in kind of order of size here. They sit in between the borders of the US and Canada, and they are the largest group of freshwater lakes in the world. And fun fact, the city of Chicago gets all of its water from Lake Michigan, which means that the city of Chicago has one of the greatest water filtration systems in the at least the United States, because Lake Michigan, gross. I don't know why I accidentally put the Appalachian in twice, but hey, is what it is. So there's the Canadian Shield. It covers a large amount of Canada, and it does kind of stretch into parts of the US. It is almost 5 million miles long in total area, I mean. It holds a large amount of natural resources like nickel, gold, and silver, but it is mostly uninhabitable due to climate conditions. So then natural resources of the North American realm. The dispersion of natural minerals is centered kind of in the Canadian Shield, the Appalachian Mountains, and the Pacific Mountains. Again, the big natural minerals and natural resources found are iron, nickel, copper, gold, uranium, diamonds, and zinc. And of course, everybody's favorite, fossil fuels. So the US population has a wide variety of ethnicities living across the country due to immigration. Due to the openness to legal immigration, it has an increasing populations, which does act as a counterbalance to declining birth rates. Because if we're not having babies, we need to have something to keep the population stable. So having people immigrate is helpful. This is also a big problem in Europe. Also, the most important thing I did forget about this is that the vast majority of the population in the US lives along the east and the west coasts, not as much at the top of the US or the bottom of the US, mostly probably due to climate. I know that the southwestern US didn't really become as urbanized and a developed area until the 1950s or so, with the invention of the air conditioner. Because when Arizona gets up to like 115 degrees, right, you need something that's going to cool shit down, or you'll wilt like a little southern flower. Even though that's not the accent for Arizona, but it's what I have. Thank you, Melissa. Other regions of North America, we have the North Atlantic coast. This is where New England is, and it's kind of grown to share many similarities with the Northeast. Most of the it consists mostly in farming and maritime practices. Southern New England defo profits off of Boston and tourism, and I would argue some of Northern New England does too. I mean, I live in New Hampshire, and I definitely can tell when it's leaf peeping season and all that stuff, because you have to suddenly start planning. Oh, I'm leaving on a Friday. I need to find the back roads. New oil reserves in Newfoundland have brought in new wealth because, of course, oil makes money, and money makes the world go round. So then we have the Northeast, which is kind of confusing with having both the Northeast and the North Atlantic coast. But the Northeast contains the capitals of both the US and Canada. So that's kind of an important part of this region, is that they hold the political power from DC in the US to Ottawa in Ontario, Canada. This also has centers, the largest population centers, but they're kind of declining as economic centers as we've become a bit more globalized and remote work can be a thing and all of that jazz. It's like things change, all that. There's also the Midwest that is where the best come from. And I say that completely biased, as I'm from there. Agriculturally based land, or they're agriculturally based lands, best known as the breadbasket of America. It produces high amounts of corn and pork. It is sometimes referred to as the Corn Belt, but also Meat Belt would be a little bit more accurate. It has a migration of young people due to lack of job prosperity, leaving an older population that left, and large corporate entities. And we have the northern frontier of Canada. It is the largest area of Canada, but it has a very, very low population in comparison. Most importantly, the Nunavut is a newly created territory with a majority population of the Inuit First Nations of around 37,000. So, hint, that's a very important thing. There's also the discovery of natural resources like oil that have become a point of friction because, well, oil makes people do stupid things, like try to take over countries and fuck with the indigenous populations. It be like it be. I just throwing that out there. All right. So we're going to get into the Middle American realm. If I'm going too fast for this, let me know. I do know that I just have several things to go through, and just, most of this should be vaguely familiar. So how the hell do we define the realm of the Middle America? It includes what we call Central America, the Caribbean islands. They're known as both they're known collectively as the Antilles. That includes both the greater and the lesser, but they are separated into two different categories of greater and lesser because of basically land resources. It is small geographically, but it's very densely populated. And definitely what the realm lacks in size, it makes up for in spades with its physiographic and cultural diversity. So what do I mean by the physical geography of Middle America? It's kind of considered a land bridge. It is that the land and islands that separates North and South America, like you can drive from the United States to Colombia through that land bridge. I wouldn't recommend it. It's going to be a long ass drive, and but it is interesting that Mexico is technically part of the North American tectonic plate. It is usually grouped into Middle America. And this is just how we're defining it within realms. Within continents, Mexico is part of North America as a continent, but within a geographic realm, it's different. It is Middle America. So therefore, this also kind of consists mostly of the North American and Caribbean tectonic plates. Mainland features, there are several mountain ranges. They mostly fall under the Sierra Madre system. There is the Sierra Madre Occidental, the Sierra Madre Oriental, the Sierra Madre del Sur, and the Sierra Madre del Chiapas. It also has a volcanic chain known as the Sierra Nevada, which stretches from east to west, and is kind of it's different than the other mountains because it's a volcanic chain. I don't believe it has been active, but who knows with how things are going and how the world is changing. Throwing that there. It also sits between the ranges is what's known as the Mexican Plateau, which is just a flatter land. So talking about the Caribbean islands, we're going to talk about the Greater Antilles. So the Caribbean is separated into two groups, and that really should be the Antilles are separated into two groups, the Greater and Lesser. The Greater Antilles is made up of Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and that's in order from largest to smallest. So the largest island there is Cuba, the smallest is Puerto Rico. They make up most of the landmass of the Antilles as a whole, and they are characterized by hills and mountains. They are also often plagued by hurricanes due to their location, but you can there's ground to grow stuff. Cuba, for instance, has sugar cane that it grows and imports. There's at least food to be had. So that's a bigger difference between the Lesser Antilles. The Lesser Antilles does not have near as much land space because, well, it's the lesser, so the tiny islands. They stretch from the Bahamas in the north to Trinidad and Tobago in the south. They are defined by their tropical climates, which makes them popular travel destinations. And they are also plagued by hurricanes due to their location. Their landmass does not allow for much food growth, so they have to import a lot of their food. So them having to be import heavy is important. So altitudinal zonation. It's the variation of ecosystems that are present due to distinct elevation change. If you're, the higher up in elevation you are, the more likely it's going to get colder. There's going to be less ground to, use for growing crops. In extreme cases, like in Peru, you can actually have human evolution change the physiology of your body. Because fun fact, in Peru, in top of the Andes Mountains, there are an indigenous tribe that have evolved to have a larger barrel chest so they can take in more oxygen in a less oxygenated area, which I don't care how many times I've said this fact, it still blows my mind. Like that's so cool. So it's really kind of it changes just kind of due to how far up and how where you go. So again, as the elevation changes, different crops and livestock thrive. And people have kind of figured out what works and what doesn't work, and they roll with what works, and what doesn't work, well, they tried something. A for effort. So resources. Mexico shares many minerals found throughout the rest of North America. So its minerals and natural resources are most like what you will find in North America. And that's natural gas, oil, silver, and gold. There are regions to the south that share many of the same resources, including timber. Smaller islands will lack in comparison due to their small landmass, which is a factor in economic strain. So small islands like the Lesser Antilles. Just kind of throwing some of that out there. Quick overview. The mainland was known as Mesoamerica. It's considered one of the cradles of civilization, dating back to the Olmec people. The native population was decimated with the start of European colonization, but would rebound in greater numbers than their North American counterparts. The islands of this area, of the entire Middle American realm, the islands are an exception, mostly due to enslavement. So some of their population didn't come back and was just replaced by mostly enslaved Africans to do work. But these populations have mostly gained independence since then, but still have strong European influences such as religion. Catholicism is rampant in parts of Middle America and especially in South America. Most of the population is a form of mestizo, which is a mix of a European indigenous group. They have two economic groups within the region. There is DR-CAFTA and CARICOM. The DR-CAFTA is kind of the Caribbean's response to NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is the Dominican Republic, Caribbean, free trade agreement. I can't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but I know it's in your textbook or it's somewhere in one of my lectures. But it is kind of important to note that they're exhibiting their own agency of like, no, we'll have a free trade agreement along with everybody else. Oh, here it is. I have a much better definition. So the DR-CAFTA is the Dominican Republic Central America Free Trade Agreement. It is obviously a free trade agreement. Originally, the agreement encompassed the US and Central American countries of Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, and it was called CAFTA. Whereas the CARICOM or CC Caribbean Community is an intergovernmental organization, political and economic union of 15 member states, which is 14 national states and one dependency throughout the Americas and the Atlantic Ocean. They have the primary objective to promote economic integration and cooperation among its members, to ensure the benefits of integration are equitably shared, and coordinate foreign policy. It is important for regional integration and for economic cooperation. So knowing the difference between those two would be helpful. Throwing hints out there. We'll talk about countries. So Mexico, its capital is Mexico City. It's the largest city by population in the Western Hemisphere, as well as home to its republic. The introduction of NAFTA, or again, the North American Free Trade Agreement, caused a massive population boom. Despite this, the majority of the population still lives in central Mexico. And again, I'm explaining what NAFTA is. So it is interesting, as much as the US is very much concerned of immigration at the border. The largest population area is smack dab in the middle in Mexico, Mexico City. So it's more densely populated, like in this area, than it is anywhere near the border. It is the world's largest producer of avocado and silver, and its population is still rising, with the last census putting the number at 126 million. And sadly, warring drug cartels has caused a lot of tension, to say the least, throughout the country. It is also a great reason for, one of the motivations of immigrants trying to leave the area, because drug cartels are bad. We also have Panama, which has a total population of around 4.3 million. It's capital of Panama City. It's also a song by Van Halen. I knew the right answer, but the wrong words. This strip of land is also known as an isthmus. It bends eastward, so Panama's orientation is east-west. What an isthmus is, it's a very narrow strip of land that connects two other neighboring bodies. So I say that, part of Middle America, other than the islands, is a massive land bridge to get down to South America. But you kind of need Panama as that connection down there. So knowing what an isthmus is might be helpful. This country was once combined with several South American countries, which made up what was known as Gran Colombia. Although the Panama Canal does run through Panama, it only received control of it in 1999, thanks to the US. It does have a very unique relationship with the rest of the world due to the Panama Canal, and it does have one of the largest economies in the region because of it. As we make money off of shipping, baby. So Cuba, it is the largest landmass and population-wise. It has 11.6 million people. So it's the largest of the Greater Antilles, and has really kind of been defined by its former relations with the Soviet Union for the last 50 years. Its capital is Havana, and the economy is really driven by tourism and agriculture. They grow some of everybody's favorite vices. Well, for me, it's sugar and coffee, and for some, tobacco. Despite it being a communist state, it is kind of making a movement towards opening up a private sector, mostly comprised of self-employed workers. So Cuba, while it's not on the radar as, oh, big things changing, it kind of should be, and it will be something to look out for in the future. The Lesser Antilles. They are made up of, I don't know why I have this twice, but I'm just going to roll with it anyway, because I have different information on this. So what can I say except you're welcome? Sorry, that popped up on my Spotify while I was driving in. So it is made up of several island systems and even more countries, territories, and dependencies. It is a melting pot of ethnicities. These countries usually depend heavily on tourism and imports, with land masses so small that the scale of economies do not function the same way that they do on the mainland. So they have to they're heavily reliant on imports, and they have very little exports. Except for, hey, do you want to come here and sit in a tropical paradise? And we'll let you go to the areas that are not the poor, crappy looking spot. We'll get you into the nice touristy areas that are safe. Well, some of these countries are independent or sovereign commonwealths. There's still some that are dependent on their former colonizing kingdom, such as the Netherlands and France. And now we get to the South American realm. Oh boy. So South American's physical geography has many large mountains, dense forests, and plateaus that define South America. For mountains, we have the Andes, which are, I'll get back into, and you have the Amazon River along with the Amazon rainforest. So when I say that, large mountains and dense forests, and there's also the Patagonian Plateau, yeah, that definitely just defines the physical geography of South America. Similar to Middle America, it has vast differences in elevation, making altitudinal zonation a common occurrence. Gee, I wonder why that popped up twice. So then we have the Andes Mountains. They are the largest continental mountain range that spans the entire continent from north to south, totaling 5,530 miles. So this is also not only the largest continental mountain range in, this hemisphere, but basically the world, just in terms of its length. It's separated into 3 different regions, cleverly named the Northern, Central, and Southern Andes. Depending on the crop, farming in the Andes can be difficult, so many people do resort to raising livestock. Mining is extremely important there, with copper being one of the largest materials exported, but they also have silver, zinc, lead, and iron. There are pockets of oil and natural gas are also around, so guess what? It's going to be exploited. There's also more info on the Patagonian Plateau. It's a vast area. It covers about 418,200 miles of the southernmost portion of South America. The plateau consists mostly of desert and semi-desert land, with pears and apples being common crops. Oil and natural gas deposits are valuable resources. The use of livestock is present absolutely everywhere, with sheep being the most common. However, this has raised some concerns about overgrazing in most areas, mostly because types of grass aren't always as the soil needs variation changes, so the grass doesn't grow as well, especially if it keeps on being used for grazing. There is also, in the history of South America, there is the Inca state, or the Incas. They are known as South America's greatest indigenous power. They were expert builders. They built Machu Picchu. By the 1500s, the Incan Empire had grown to the height of its power and ruled an area that stretched from modern-day Ecuador to Chile, which, that's a lot. That's pretty dang impressive. It had an estimated population of at least 10 million people, which were separated into 4 regions that were connected by an extensive road network. This is kind of what makes it a bit of a cradle of civilization, because it has this expansion has all these people under one kind of government control. But they also did crazy shit, like operating without the wheel or a formal writing system. They used Cupuis instead, which is kind of like their version of hieroglyphics. And they had no money, or at least what we call money. All right. So the Iberian invaders, so bad division is modern maps of South America took shape when the Iberian colonizers arrived or invaded, really. Iberian means those from the Iberian Peninsula, which is just Portugal and Spain. They saw a vast potential in the raw materials and farmland. So eventually, Francisco Pizarro got a military crew from Spain and began his invasion. The new order that emerged in Western South America placed the indigenous peoples in serfdom to the Spaniards. It became the formation of great haciendas. Hacienda is literally just a large estate in a Spanish-speaking country. Sometimes it is equated with a plantation, but there are important differences between these two types of an agricultural enterprise. So another fun thing, because I can't just not talk about it, but the geography of cocaine. So I swear again, this class is not just about all illegal drugs. However, all cocaine that comes from the US comes from here. Comes in from northwestern South America through the Middle American realm up into the US. So it really affects, it has rebounding effects in Middle America with warring drug cartels and other illegal, not fun shenanigans. Same as in South America, does not create for fun conditions. And I'm just going to go on and make a very controversial statement. Cocaine is bad, y'all. Don't use cocaine. I know, I'm going wild, but don't use cocaine. That's the one thing you learn from this class. I've done my job. There are, of course, stages of production, which means extraction of from the coca plants, collection and processing, and then distribution. So Colombia, where cocaine and insurgencies are not a good mix. Surprisingly, actually, cocaine and insurgencies are not a good mix anywhere. Cocaine and insurgencies are just not good. So the rise of the narcotics industry that's really fueled by outside demand, primarily the US, but there are others. And it was coupled with the inherent violence of this industry, because drugs, like, very similar to, like, you want to protect your product, there's cartels and own armies type of deal. There's a lot of violence that goes on in illegal drug trades. So drug cartels have created vast networks that have infiltrated government at nearly every level, and have also corrupted the military and the police. Cartels have used their own national armies, but also employed their own private armies. One of them is the, I always want to call it FARC because it's silly, but FARC, which I'll get to on the next slide. But also, fun fact of cocaine hippos, which were hippos that drug lord Pablo Escobar had in his own menagerie. And when he was finally not a problem anymore, shall we say, they decided that the hippos were too big to do anything with. And that was a problem because there was 1 male and 3 females. So currently there are around 200 South American hippos that run wild. And I don't know if y'all know this, but hippos will fuck you up. Hippos are scary. Just Google a hippo eating a watermelon, and you will. They might look like these cute little, like, oh, you're just a big bad thing that swims in the sea. You're so cute. No, they're terrible. So Colombia being on the rebound. Again, I told you this is where I talk more about FARC or FARC. So Colombia's problems have been compounded by the presence of various rebel groups, most notably the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, which is how it would, the acronym would be appropriate if we said the words in Spanish. I just don't know that well enough to even attempt. But they contested government control of several provinces and established mutually convenient partnerships with cocaine cartels. Since 2002, Colombia has mounted its successful campaigns to defeat the FARC militarily and even to persuade them to give up their arms legally. And finally, in 2016, there was a ceasefire between the FARC and the Colombian government. And so Colombia has kind of transformed from a failed state to a more stable, secure, and potentially prosperous country. However, cocaine still is there, and it's still an issue for many. All right, the European realm. Like I said earlier, if there's anything that wasn't covered on that lecture that didn't get uploaded because it was too large, I have put it in this PowerPoint and we'll talk today. I'm not going to see I just went to South America. Some of the part 2 didn't get in there. But yes. So the physical geography of Europe. Europe can be separated into 4 different regions. The Western uplands, the Northern European lowland, the Central uplands, and the Alpine system. Europeans have had a large amount of natural minerals available to them, as well as dense forests, rivers, and oceans, which they have definitely exploited. So the Western uplands are also known as the Northern Highlands. This area contains several different types of climates spanning from from mild temperate to freezing, but mostly it consists of colder temperatures due to its proximity to the Arctic Circle. This consists of the Scandinavia, which is the Scandinavian peninsulas, and Iceland. Scandinavian peninsulas are technically Norway and Sweden and a little bit of Finland, but Finland doesn't call themselves Scandinavian, and they wouldn't identify as that. So just have that in mind. It also includes parts of the British Isles. So the Northern European lowlands, they are also known as the Northern European Plain. This is an area that stretches from the Ural Mountains and the Black Sea, which is near basically the eastern boundary of Russia. The western boundary for Russia, the eastern boundary of Europe to Russia. So there it stretches over most of the European continent, and it has minimal elevation changes that are only really broken up by hills. The large flat land makes it ideal for farming, but there is a kind of issue of water drainage with flatlands. Whoopsie doodles, but Europeans have learned to make do. There's also the central uplands. They are a much smaller region, unlike the others in Europe. They are mostly contained within France and Germany. So although this region has a higher average elevation than the European plain, it still consists mostly of just hills and smaller mountains. So it's not like, oh, here's this big mountainous region. it's got some like, yeah, that's a mountain. That's all right, yeah. But it's not like huge fuck you mountains. Uh, the forested mountain ranges are most common in the area, leading to timber being its main resource. We also have the Alpine region. This covers most of Southern Europe and follows along the Mediterranean coastline. Has several notable peninsulas, including the Italian, the Iberian, and the Balkan Peninsula, which is always fun because there's the Balkans and the Baltics in Europe. And let me tell you, I had a lot of fun when I was recording that lecture twice. We're not going to talk about that right now. Anyhow, there are also several mountain ranges, such as the Alps, hence Alpine, Alps, the Balkans, the Carpathians and the Pyrenees. To the south is the Mediterranean, Aegean, and Adriatic seas. So there is the European Union and the Schengen area. Schengen is how it's pronounced. I had to look it up, like many things. So similar to the US, European countries went through great post-industrialization changes. It also was compounded by the two world wars and increasing political tensions with Eastern powers, meaning the Soviet Union. So the EU was formed in an attempt to unify European states and facilitate economic growth. The real point in making this union, again, was to have a unified state so that maybe another world war wouldn't break out. And, at first it was kind of, let's keep our hand on Germany and make sure that they're not acting like a naughty child and trying to do it again. Later on, after Germany kind of became more westernized and amicable in the end of the Cold War, Germany became less of the annoying little brother of the EU and became more of a leader within the EU. The creation of the EU has highlighted economic imbalances across Europe, which does stress some wealthier countries, while also fracturing them internally between wealthier and poorer regions. This has created a lot of challenges for governments within the EU. Particularly when you join the EU, you have to sit with a particular set of laws and compliances. And one of the things that the EU does do is they provide subsidies to some of the less economically or the economically disadvantaged countries, which sounds like a great idea. You're helping out there, but it's a issue of for some of the individuals that some of the bigger countries that are wealthier have to put in a bit more money to help out those that are less advantaged, and those that had joined earlier and were receiving said subsidies, now they're not as much. So that's less than fun. This is also kind of a form of supranationalism. Which means it's a venture involving 3 or more states that have political, economic, and cultural cooperation to promote shared objectives. So the EU is kind of making this big European state, it's a supranation. So this is kind of what I was talking about a little earlier, consequences of unification. With one market, EU directives aim to create a single market of producers, consumers, businesses, and workers. The idea there is that corporations should be able to produce and sell products anywhere within the EU without legal impediments. And the same is true for workers. They should be free to move anywhere within the EU to get jobs. This has caused some consequences, such as in Poland, where once they joined the EU, a massive amount of Polish people were like, fuck this noise, I'm going to go and try to find a job. But they did come back. So there is that going for them. Member states have had to harmonize a wide range of national laws, from taxation to environmental protection to educational standards. And attempts to leave the EU, Brexit, have caused, let's say, just increased tensions within Europe. Oh, those Brits. There's also the Schengen area. It is an area that consists of 27 or 26, 27, I think, European countries that have abolished passports and function as a single entity in regard to international travel. So once you've stepped foot into the Schengen area of Europe, you are free to go anywhere in that area. This is how part of the refugee crisis that happens in the mid 2010s kind of was complicated, because people fleeing from like Syria and Libya and from Northern Africa would do their best to either cross over to Italy in terrible makeshift boats, or trying to get over through Turkey or Bulgaria into Greece, as that's when they got there, they would be safe. This has caused a lot of political tension that I didn't have a chance to get through, and well, it wasn't recording, but yeah. So there is also NATO, which is a very big factor in Europe. NATO is the North Atlantic Trade Organization. We like to have lots of acronyms just to confuse you. It was created in 1949 after the signing of the treaty. NATO really functions as a collective defense agreement for nations, and it was primarily created as a check for the growing Soviet power post-World War II. Although the Soviet Union has collapsed, NATO still holds relevance, as political tensions in Eastern Europe are ongoing. Let me say that that is the least amount that I could say, considering I don't know Ukraine. Just throwing that bit out there. And for European geopolitics, here are some of the bigger differences between what NATO does and what the EU does. So NATO does overlap a bit with the EU, but it's a very different organization. NATO is primarily concerned with security and politics, not really giving too much of a fuck about economics. That is EU's job. Also, the NATO is led by the United States, and the United States provides the bulk of the military muscle. So involving NATO does solidify that you are aligning yourself with the West, and US in particular, which for areas that are close to Russia or the former Russian republics, satellite states, it gets a little sticky. Mainly because also NATO includes Turkey. Turkey is a big kind of tension point, as it is, by its location, it is super close to Russia and Southwest Asia. It also kind of is iffy on where it stands in terms of politics. They do eventually get into the EU because they had to kind of compromise on the whole refugee crisis, where Turkey was like, okay, we'll close down borders and stop as much traffic coming in this way so that, you know, you guys can have time to figure things out. They leverage their way in. So that's for the PowerPoint. That's all I've got. Do you guys have any questions that, about the exam? I'll go over anything again. I'm happy to. Yes. No worries. NAFTA? Sure. Yeah. So NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. And the area it covers is basically it's an agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada that free trade can go along their borders, that they're not going to put as much tariffs or other things so that there's more opportunity for trade. Good question. No, yes, ma'am.
What is this?
When? Monday. Yep.
What should we know about altitudinal zoning?
Basically what it is, like, how would you define what altitudinal zonation is? Like, how would you describe it? No, you don't need to know the zones themselves, but you should know that, that, you know, tropical areas are only suitable for certain crops, whereas, higher zones might be better for dairy and the greatest vegetable that ever came to life, the potato. In highest elevations is either too much with ice or you can sometimes go a little bit further down and it's really only suitable for grazing livestock. So just knowing that its temperatures, altitudinal changes will affect what life is like there, what can be grown, what can be taken care of, all that jazz. Did you have another question?
Yeah, you know.
I sure as hell will. I will upload this PowerPoint. I will upload this recording. I do apologize about having the European Realm Part 2 not really show up. I had a fun time recording that on Monday and realized halfway through that I had to pause it because my cat was being a cat. And when I went to unpause it, I somehow muted myself. So half that lecture was just silence. So I'm like, well, fuck, I'll just record it yesterday or tomorrow. I recorded it yesterday and it's too big for me to upload. So I will tinker around with either splitting up that lecture or somehow like in the file, or I will sacrifice for you guys and just record 2 lectures because I love you all that much. Thank you. Do I have any other questions? Yes.
More than European plans that just look flat.
Yes. No, go ahead.
So I know you threw a bunch of fun data points.
Yeah.
If we like our own for that, let me do that.
Go for it. So again, to review what the format is, it's going to start with 15 multiple choice questions. I recommend, biggest thing I recommend for this quiz is before you even start answering any questions, read through it because I am fallible and I may have had an answer in somewhere or maybe a hint to an answer somewhere else. So if you read through it, you might not be sure, but you're like, oh, this is what that is. Makes sense. I don't always practice what I preach, but I do know that that's a good practice to try. So it will be 15 multiple choice. They're going to be worth about 3 points each. There's 15 matching that will be worth 3 points each. So like the matching is going to be like if I asked about altitudinal zonation, you would have to define what altitudinal zonation is, or what NATO might be, or that something to that effect, to just kind of define what the hell I meant by that. The short answer is not an essay, so I want to make everybody like relieved and calm about that. But what it is I want you to give me at least 5 facts. They can be the fun facts that I throw out there in lectures. They can be just random facts that you remembered, that, Colombia had cocaine hippos or something.
Access is one.
Yeah. And if you want to add more than 5, each one after 5 will give you a bonus point towards it all. So I'm not telling, I would not recommend focusing solely on the fun facts, but if you have some sort of facts or whatever, or information that you didn't know about before, but learned or was clarified, throw that in. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. This will also kind of help you stimulate your brain juices flowing so that we do have a geography briefing that will be due a week after the quiz. And that geography briefing is a page to 2 pages, double spaced, Times New Roman, 12-point font for my old person eyes. And you're basically telling me something that you found super interesting about one of the realms we covered, or super like something you didn't realize or didn't realize the impact of XYZ. It doesn't have to be huge. I mean, I've had, like, I still say one of my best geography briefings I got was somebody talked about K-pop in reference to South Korea. And like, this kid also did this one in class, and I'm super impressed because she wrote like 3 pages all about K-pop. And I'm like, all right, I'm happy that that's what you're interested in. I have learned more about K-pop today because I did not really know much about it other than it was Korean pop music. So that can be varied. It just has to be within the realm we have just covered. Any other questions? Yes.
Can we use the study guide?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, you can use your study guide. You can use your handwritten notes. If you've printed out PowerPoints, you can use that. If you have your computer, you can use the PowerPoints. I will say, just please don't use Google, because I mean, I'm giving you everything else. So you can also have the textbook. So if you have it electronically, you'll have the textbook there. You can bring in your laptop. I may occasionally you might see me walking up and down just to kind of make sure that everything is on the level. I haven't had an issue with this last semester, and I hope I won't have an issue with it ever. But you have everything at your fingertips to help you do fantastically on this quiz. Some of it is just, remember, you have an hour and 15 minutes. You can write out your fun facts and all that jazz before class, and just so that you can copy it right down, easy peasy, and then take your time really reading the quiz and answering it as accurately as possible. Because that's quizzes in the end. It's not the big all end all be all of you learning things, but you preparing for it and having this information and remembering some of it. That is more of what I care about. Hence tell me stuff that you're interested in, or a fun fact that you were like, yeah, that's cool. If it's, the Peruvians that have the barrel chests, if it's, oh, hey, this is where this NHL player happens to be from. I don't promise extra points on that, but you will get brownie points, which account for not much other than my undying affection. That counts for you guys too, Zoomers. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just 2 things. Study guide, the supernaturalism.
Mhm.
Was it one at the no, what it was.
Yes, it's the EU, basically.
Like lumping together all the countries.
Yeah.
For political and economic.
It's basically if there are 3 or more countries that are forming kind of together, either politically, economically, and or culturally, they're all cooperating, that becomes a supranation. It sounds like super, so that's how I sometimes think of it, and like, oh, they're being super nations, because they're all in cooperation, but it is spelled differently. Because the English language hates dyslexics, and I hate it too. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? Comments on life? Perfect. All right, I am going to stop the recording. I will say real fast for anybody that's just watching the recording, if you have a question, please email me. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And other than that, have a fantastic day.